Welcome back to Inside the 12. I'm Pete Sousa, and it is October, which means that early returns on some of the Big 12 prospects getting set for the NFL draft are in. Nobody better, the best draft analyst for my money, to break it all down with than Todd McShay. Of course, Todd McShay, host of the McShay Show on The Ringer and Spotify, and also the McShay Report newsletter. So I want to get your take, just kind of check in. Sawyer Robertson's a guy whose numbers have been lights out. What does he need to do to continue his progress this season to maybe become a guy who scouts look at as a starter and not a backup?
Yeah, I've been really encouraged by what we've seen. And obviously with Baylor, you got to put points on the board. And Dave Aranda is such a great defensive coach, but the personnel has not quite been, what you would expect or what you would hope for Baylor. And so it's really been on Sawyer Roberts' shoulders, right? And I go back, we knew that was a good Auburn defense at the time, and to throw for 400 plus and to keep them in that game, even though the score didn't quite indicate it, was a real tribute to what Robertson and that offense has been doing all season long. Now, Robertson as a prospect, I've seen growth. You know, like 2 tough losses against Arizona State and Auburn, but they pull off the win. He's constantly getting pressured and kind of, beaten up, and through the course of a game, I've not seen him waver. The toughness and hanging in the pocket and making throws under pressure, those have been the areas that I've seen kind of the most growth. He's got a nice arm. Smooth delivery, former baseball player. He's like 6'4", 220 in that range. We'll see what the verified measurables are. But for someone who's that big to have the ability to run and to create and to extend plays is a huge positive, especially in today's NFL game. And then just some of the throws that he can make, right? Just the way he drops the ball in and layers it and trajectory on throws. I think he'll continue to ascend so long as things go the way they have in the first month of the season. And if he does, listen, this quarterback class is, like I said before, it's not what we expected. Garrett Nussmeier is struggling. We don't know if it's an injury or what the deal is there. Cade Klubnik has regressed for Clemson. We've seen Arch Manning. There was talk about him in the 2026 draft. I tried to warn everyone starting back in May. So Drew Aller, I think one of the most overrated players and certainly the most overrated quarterback coming into the year for Penn State. And we saw those same flaws that we've seen in the past show up against Oregon this past week. So it's created an opening for a lot of these other quarterbacks, like Dante Moore from Oregon, who I mentioned, like Sawyer Robertson, like Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, to, if they continue to play at the level they've played and continue to grow and develop as the season progresses, they'll be in an interesting spot. I think Robertson right now is working his way into that day 2 status, where you draft a player in the 2nd, 3rd round as a backup that you hope can develop into a starter. And that's coming a long way from a guy who, the national and Blesto grades, the NFL teams kind of contract out these groups. They had Robertson as a late round prospect coming into the year. So he absolutely has improved his draft stock.
All right, I know the numbers are eye-opening for Josh Hoover. What does the tape say for Josh Hoover?
He's fun to watch, man. I mean, I think the whole nation got a glimpse in that Monday night game, right? In the opener against North Carolina and Bill Belichick. And that thing went south on our guy Bill real quickly. And part of the reason it did is because of Hoover and the way he played in that game. And they've, obviously coming off a tough loss this past week. But when you look at Hoover, he's just a junior, and I think he's gonna benefit from another year at TCU. But he certainly has gotten the attention of NFL scouts with his quick trigger, the decisiveness. You just watch him and it reminds me of all these Texas high school quarterbacks, right? When you go back to whether it was Johnny Manziel talking on the field, not the off the field issue, talking Colt McCoy was kind of the beginning of it, but more so like Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and some of these guys, right? It's that tempo, the way they play the game, decisive, balls out, moving around in the pocket, not necessarily have to be great athletes and runners. Kyler is, but just the ability to kind of extend in short areas and just move the offense, keep progressing it quickly. That's what Hoover does. And he just rips the ball, man. and he's aggressive. And yes, he'll make a mistake here and there. But when you look at what he's done, he's completing 67% of his throws. He's got 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions this year. They're 3-1 as a team. I think, that Arizona State loss, while difficult and gut-wrenching, I think they learned some things about themselves. I also like the Eric McAllister, the wide receiver they have. Not huge on NFL scouts' radars coming in the year, but he's 6'3", 205. He's a guy who's averaging 25 yards per catch, 13 catches this year, 3 touchdowns. So, and he's a former Boise State transfer. So we're seeing a lot of guys who are transferring into different places and having success in their final year. I think McAllister's a guy with Hoover at the trigger who's really improved his stock and could wind up being somewhere in those middle round ranges.
Well, you talked about the signal callers. How about the pass catchers? You did mention McAllister, but at tight end, Tanner Koziol and Michael Trigg could be 2 of the best at their position in the country. What are you seeing there?
Where'd this Koziol guy come from? Sousa?
Ball State.
I'm so used to our guy Steve Mensch on the McShay show. Ball State, right?
Yeah.
I went and looked at the scouting services, like National and Blesto, the NFL uses, the scouting departments. He wasn't on the list. He's 6'7". He's 250, 23 catches, and a huge target, right? And he can block inline. You can flex him out. So he's a guy. I just mentioned guys who are transferring. I talked about McAllister from Boise State coming in to TCU. How about Ball State to Houston and putting up 23 receptions through 4 or 5 games? So it's been fun to watch him. And I'm really intrigued to see how the season progresses and if he can continue at this kind of clip. He's got a lot of guys racing back to the tape, going back to Ball State to try to figure out what the progression was in his career. But Koziol has been fascinating to watch, and he one of the biggest risers in this class, because when you're not even on the radar and now teams are looking at him. But I'm not saying he's Darnell Washington. Remember Washington coming out of Georgia?
Yes.
He's with the Steelers now. He's got that kind of frame though, and he's not quite as fast and athletic. Washington was a unicorn, but had a lot of drops and issues with that. This guy's not as fast and maybe as athletic, but when you get a big target like that, teams look at him and say, as a number 2, even number 3 tight end, depending on the offense, in a rotation, he can provide some and do different things. And then you mentioned Michael Trigg. Man, he was at USC with Jackson Dart. Now he's transferred to Baylor. And he had that big first game early in the year. He had the drop at the end of that game. He was exhausted. He got hit in the head the play before, but was really productive all season long. He's 6'3.5". He's 250 pounds. He runs a 4.65. So this is a guy that scouts have kind of been waiting for to take that next step. And through 4 or 5 games for Baylor, he's got 21 catches already this year. He's averaging almost 14 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. So Trigg and Koziol have been 2 of the fastest rising tight ends in this year's class. And even the Joe Royer from Cincinnati is another Big 12 guy. So those 3 tight ends that I think are going to get drafted out of the Big 12.
All right, we got about 30 seconds left. Dylan Edwards really splashes back onto the scene last week against UCF, 160-plus rushing yards after injury, kept him out pretty much all season long. What are you seeing from him so far that you like?
Bud, remember when we talked in late August, early September, after that Week 0 game, and I said Edwards is a guy that I can't wait to see get going, and scouts were talking about him as maybe a riser, someone who could have a big year. Then he got injured. I think it was the first play of that Iowa State game, right?
Special teams play.
Yeah, special teams play. And so you were wondering, with that 5'9", 175-pound frame, can he come back? Can he be the same guy in terms of explosiveness? He is a phenomenal athlete. He hasn't gotten really involved in the passing game yet, but I expect that to come. He's explosive. He's quick. He's one of those guys, Get him the ball with a little bit of space on the move, and he can create. And it was great to see for an undersized back for him to come in and put up the numbers that he did against last week in that whatever
UCF.
Game was. UCF. Thank you. It was 20 carries, 166 yards. and can also help in the return game. So I'm excited. You got a big game this week, man. Kansas State, Baylor, Dylan Edwards, Bryson Washington, the 2 running backs, Sawyer Robertson, Michael Trigg. There's a lot of prospects in that game.
All right, won't be the last lie I told you, and definitely wasn't the first. I have one more question for you, okay? How about guys on defense this year that folks aren't talking about in the Big 12? Anyone that you have on your board or you've been looking at and you're saying, man, this guy is making an impact, and he will on Sundays as well?
The Texas Tech guys have been fun to watch. And they remember those offensive tackles I talked to you about from Utah?
Yeah, Spencer Fano.
First-round prospect.
Yeah,
Spencer Fano, Caleb Lomu. Those guys, and they're kind of rotating. And it's helping because David Bailey from Texas Tech and Romello Height, both guys that, have come in and have been huge additions. They've combined for 6 sacks this year through 4 games. Texas Tech's undefeated. That team's legit, by the way. They're the best team in the Big 12. They might be a college football playoff team when it's all said and done. They gave those offensive tackles fits. Specifically, I thought Lomu, who's that left tackle, the right tackle is actually the higher prospect, Fanu. But those are 2 players that I think have really stood out. I really like this Dom Orange guy from Iowa State, defensive tackle.
Yeah.
About 6'2 and a half, 300-plus pounds. Not the greatest pass rusher, but NFL scouts are really high on Orange out of Iowa State.
Yeah, he's a bad dude. All right, Todd, you're a bad dude. Where can people find you, and what's coming up on the McShay Show? Anything big?
Well, we just our Saturday nights are the most fun.
Yeah, they are cool. You guys come on live right after the big games. Yeah,
we've been kind of sneaking in late in the games. Like, if you want to come watch the end of the game with us, last week it was awesome. We had we cut into the 2 great games, Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State, Oregon, and then we do a live show for like 2 hours, recap the whole day. This week we're going to cut into the primetime game again, Florida State, Miami. So that's the big one. You can find the McShay Show. It's on YouTube, obviously Spotify and Apple and everywhere else you get your podcasts.
It is the party that everybody's going to. I saw the heads up. I got the alert that you guys were going live during the game, and there were like thousands of people in the waiting room, literally right before you guys came on. It is legit, and you got to be a part of it, right, if you're a college football fan.
I appreciate it. We have a lot of fun. We had a couple thousand people that hung for the whole night and just were, and responding with all their negativity. Probably had a couple cocktails, but it's a fun hang for a couple hours on a Saturday night.
Todd McShay, you are a fun hang, man. Thanks so much for spending time with us on Inside the 12.
You got it, brother. Talk to you soon.